and thankfully moving away from the one-size-fits-all factory model schooling that we've been stuck with for well over a century.
I remember one time being at a big homeschooling conference, California Homeschooling Conference, and seeing a bunch of grown homeschoolers on a panel. And they were asked by curious and also worried parents what was the best thing they got from homeschooling. And I remember one young woman saying, the best thing I got from homeschooling was knowing and understanding that whatever it is I want to learn, I'm capable of making that happen. Which I think speaks to the fact that homeschooling tends to produce kids or facilitate kids who are self-led, and even if they're not self-led, who have a fair amount of sovereignty and self-esteem and also a sense of themselves.
As my husband and I have always not fit in and have often done things in ways that were weird or unconventional. And I think that those unconventional approaches are what led us both to achieve success academically and professionally. And so I think that unconventionality may be more the salient feature here that kind of gives us a confidence to take a more unconventional approach with our daughter's education.
You have to be your own judge. All the great artists, chefs, creators, musicians, I think also have great taste. If you read Schopenhauer, for example, he knew that he was the smartest man alive at that time in his region and that nobody else would ever fully understand or appreciate him. But he made peace with that because he knew that his work would be remembered long after he was gone. So I do think there is an internal self-confidence that can arise from your own judgment and taste. And sometimes that is enough.
I guess for families that are on the borderline of taking the leap into homeschooling, what I would probably advise and coach them into is just try and start. You just never know. And you can always go back to what you were doing before.
Do you think that people today are perhaps less confident than they've been at other points in history? What does confidence mean to you? I have my own way of defining confidence, but I'd be curious to know what you think. And is perhaps the lack of confidence due to traditional schooling? I don't know. Maybe that's too much of a leading question. But I'd be curious to know why you think people lack confidence and how we can cultivate this in ourselves and our children.
That's a great question. I think with the international and the very prestigious schools, they're interested in maintaining an insular environment. So they really, more than anything, it's not that their academics are any better. It's really that they do not need to mix with the regular population. And how they do that is through making sure that students are, I think their matrices of evaluating and their matrix of success are outdated. But I really think that these schools are really to maintain the rich and the elite, stay with the rich and the elite.
Certainly the bar has been raised by traditional schooling. Oh my God, I have to train my kid in mathematics. I don't remember mathematics. Oh my God, I have to get my kid into Harvard. Everyone else's kid is getting into Harvard. How do I get them into Harvard? These kinds of situations I think are very intimidating for a home teacher. The external world also sets a lot of credence in credentials. And how do you know you're going to get your kid to the point where they will gather these credentials and pass these credentials? I think that's intimidating and scary.
So we're seeing a tyranny of metrics across a number of fields. Whether that's hospitals implementing these metrics to reduce emergency room wait times that then lead just to ambulances ramping or people canceling surgeries to get more doctors into the ER, not actually improving patient care, but just kind of overly focusing on this, on metrics. I do think on an emotional level, there is something that can be falsely reassuring about what we can measure and feeling like, oh, I must be doing okay because my child is doing 10 extracurriculars and, getting these scores on their exams. Whereas a lot of things that I think are deeply meaningful, whether that's just hours that my daughter spends kind of fiddling around making these art projects, either through coding or a lot of really, I think, creative and thoughtful endeavors. Intellectual endeavors are tough to measure. And so I think we don't kind of get that external reassurance of this is great that my child is spending kind of hours in their imagination or hours reading, but we know that those times are so valuable.
Naval, I know you're interested in meditation and spirituality and thinking more on my own journey coming into confidence. I really don't think it would have been possible without practicing meditation and really taking a deep look at my own conditioning to see what I really wanted in life, what was important to me, and letting go of the things that weren't as important or that society had led me to believe were important that didn't really matter. I was wondering if you have thoughts on this.
Meditation does really just help resolve problems and unlock latent conviction that we might have within ourselves. At the very least, it gives us time to be with ourselves, think for ourselves, and figure out what it is that we truly want, and then articulate it to ourselves deep down in such a way that it becomes conviction.
Just one more cool tidbit on the confidence front. I recently did an interview with Rohan Mahimkar, who built Prodigy Game. It's an adaptive learning app. And when they give children problems, they're looking to keep them in the zone of proximal development, which means that the problem isn't too easy and it isn't too hard. And giving them just the right level of challenge is what keeps the game fun and engaging for them. So that's something to think about when we're homeschooling our children, that zone of proximal development.
That's also the definition of flow. When you do something at the edge of your ability, too hard and it's frustrating, too easy and you're not learning anything or having fun. So it's a definition of fun, it's a definition of flow, and it's the place for optimal learning.
Naval, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on neuroplasticity and how it relates to cognitive development. I will explain. For example, with a subject like foreign language, it's obvious that it's best to start as early as possible. Children's brains are sponges. However, with math and literacy, I'm not so sure. According to Jean Piaget's stages of cognitive development, children aren't capable of understanding abstract concepts at a certain age, and it might be frustrating and moreover a waste of time to try to teach them before they're cognitively ready. And by cognitive development stages, I don't mean their age. Some children's brains are ready before others. On the other side, it might be more about what you teach and how.